Hi, good evening, and welcome to AIoT Hub. I'm Paul Wealls. Great to have you. We've got an absolutely fantastic show today with Afzal Mangal, Evan Unrue from TD Cynics, and of course, my good friend, John Staveley. And my internet connection seems to be playing up. Hi, John. How are you doing?
Very good. Just got back from Scotland. I printed out Afzal's book, so it's single-sided. It's not actually that big, but yeah. But a good read. Great to be back in it. You appeared to have frozen. Paul, were you having his issues with his internet connection again?
As always, this is the choice of being a travel salesman and being stuck in hotels. Yeah, internet go for John. I'm going to let you bring in and introduce you guys.
Great. So tonight we have Evan Unrue. Evan, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi there, guys. So yes, Evan Unrue. I am the EMEA Chief Technologist for data, AI, IoT, and business applications for TD Cynics. Probably one of the bigger companies you've never heard of unless you're a reseller or a vendor. We sit in between technology vendors and resellers, really giving them reach and scale into the market.
Great, and we're very honoured to have Afzal on tonight. I've been following Afzal on LinkedIn for a while. He's a great commentator. He's always got something interesting to say, so it's great to have him on board tonight. Afzal, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, John, Paul, and Evan. Nice to meet you. Super happy to be here. So I write things on LinkedIn, usually about IoT. I recently wrote a book about IoT, the hype that no one knows about. And that's what we're going to talk about, of course, today. Apart from that, I work at Deutsche Telekom. You might know them as DT or maybe T-Mobile. And I'm running my own startup, IoT Creators, that offers no-frills connectivity and middleware solutions for IoT devices.
That's excellent. Afzal, really pleased to have you on. I do apologize for my internet goes. It was been brilliant all day today. Afzal's book is, trying to get it there, it's absolutely brilliant. It's IoT, the hype no one knows about. This is your second book, if that's right?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And what was the first book again? Remind us.
The first one was how telcos destroyed your future relevance. So that was also about IoT, but more focused on telcos. And to be honest, it was more a rant. So I just needed to write down all my frustration in a doc, and then someone said, why not publish it as a book? So
yeah.
And DT Excellent. Were okay with that.
Sorry?
And Deutsche Telekom were okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, no one complained. I'm still employed, so I do think that I have a lot of enemies, but I'm still there. Good. Yeah.
And so, what brought it up for you? What was the catalyst for writing the book, the IoT, the hype that no one knows about?
It's what John said. He's following me on LinkedIn, and I hear that a lot. And I'm honored when I hear that. But I also realized a while ago that for 6 or 7 years, I'm always writing about the same stuff. I also realized that my career in IoT, so in telco industry, it started more or less 18 years ago. But in IoT, it started in 2017. And I think since 2024, I started to realize that, hey, I'm talking about, or we are talking about the same things as 10 years ago. We are doing the same things as 10 years ago, like smart buildings, smart cities, smart water management, smart water level management. What else do we have? Healthcare, agriculture, and those use cases that we were working on were very old. While the promise of IoT was we can connect everything. We can connect the unthinkable and do everything remote, do everything in a more efficient way, in a more sustainable way. And I also noticed, because I do a lot of stage talks and panel sessions, and every time when I'm on stage, we are sugarcoating the situation. We are talking about that one big project, that single project that scaled. But as soon as we go off the stage and catch up with each other, everyone, at least when they talk to me, complain about the same thing. Like, I do some pilots, and most of those pilots do not scale.
Yeah.
And people always ask the question, how can I scale my pilots? And then everyone starts, like smart people, they start to talk about technology, fragmentation. It needs to be more democratized, as you just said. And some people talk about lock-ins, all the technology problems, but no one talks about the biggest problem, and that is the fact that we are not doing enough pilots. I think that's our biggest problem. If we do 10 pilots, it means that we are not doing. There are 90 pilots that we are not doing.
Yeah. But I mean, sometimes sort of like, to have a bit of a debate and conversation about that. Sometimes you don't need to do a pilot if you've done the validation and recognize that actually the value return, so on, doesn't justify that pilot, and it may be the wrong time. Yeah, with previous platforms and products that I've brought to market weren't successful, not because they weren't good or great, but they were too soon, they were too early, or that the cost was too high at that time, and therefore, being quite specific with the discovery and validation, enabling you to make that constructive decision to go or not go, rather than to do just for the sake of doing.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, when there is no value, I mean, you should talk about value from day one, right? And when it's not there, then it doesn't make sense to start a pilot. But what I mean is that, and I can't say this enough, is that for every, let's say, nurse in a hospital who throws away expensive medication at the end of the month, lots of medication, expensive medication, just because they didn't receive an alarm because the refrigeration was not closed properly. So for every nurse that is doing this like in a smart way, by having a temperature sensor and an open closed door sensor on the fridge, and checking on the app whether she has an alarm or not. For every nurse that is doing this in a smart way, there are thousands who are not doing this, and there are 10,000 who are not even aware of this solution. Maybe a nurse is not the one who's going to implement the solution, but you get the picture, right?
Yeah,
and it's the same with smart city. You like this example, we can use it for all industries. How does I wrote about him in my book, my brother-in-law, who works at a not a police officer, but I think you call it a local law enforcement, right? So he's using a solution in his city that they have these smart poles in some like busy areas of the city, especially where young people where they hang out, where they like bother the elderly people. So these poles, they measure the noise level, and when there's too much noise, he gets an alarm and he knows where to go, right? But he's also like once a week, so let's say 5 days or 4 days a month, he's checking all those parking spots that are where only people are allowed to park with a license because they have a handicap, right? You have those parking spots in the UK as well, right? Like special parking places for people with a handicap, right? So like 4 or 5 days a month, he's checking like proactively all these park spaces just to find out if a car is parking there illegal, like in an illegal way, without the license. Yeah, when someone is in a hurry, but they don't have the license for this parking spot, they still park it there anyway. They're like, I will be gone in 10 minutes, right? So he's checking all those parking spots to find out if he can write fines, penalties. But why is he not aware? And why is his boss not aware? Why is his director not aware that there is a technical solution, an IoT solution for this, and in a neighboring city, like 5 kilometers away from where they are already using that solution for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. I think it's if we take a step back and think about the terminology of IoT and sort of stipulating what it is, because one of the things that you're quite clear on the book is like the lack of awareness, as you've just touched on with the case with your brother-in-law, the lack of awareness of IoT. What is IoT? Evan, can I bring you in here and ask for your explanation of what you would summarize IoT as being?
I think ultimately it's filling in the data blind spots that we have within a business or everyday life by acquiring data from physical spaces and being able to inject, action and response back into those physical spaces in some cases. I didn't expect to rhyme there, be poetic, but yeah, I mean it's a data acquisition layer, and also it's a response layer, so you can trigger actions either into a process or some kind of actuation. If you're dealing with a physical device, for example, you want to cut power to a diesel generator that's overheating or whatever it might be. But yeah, primarily for me, data acquisition layer. Just, if it's okay, Afzal, just wanted to touch back on your comment around why do 10 pilots when you could do 100? Because we all, me and Paul have had endless conversations around the POC graveyard, as we like to call it, or POC purgatory, as you called it in your book.
I should have trademarked that.
You should have done, absolutely. And I wanted to get some clarity from you, because in my experience, one of the reasons that the space I operate in, which is enterprise technology channels through working with resellers and vendors and system integrators, is because they couldn't dedicate the capacity, the resource and the focus to pilots for long enough to see them take off and scale. It takes a lot of a company's energy and focus to run a pilot, certainly properly at any degree of scale, and for the vendors and the solution providers to be on that journey with them. So when you said, why do 10 when you could do 100, my kind of brain thinking, well, that's why. They don't have the capacity or the attention span, and they can't afford to see these pilots on their pipeline reports for more than 2 quarters, which is typically what's happening. But rethinking that, I was curious as to whether you meant maybe they're not failing fast enough to work through a number of use cases, a number of pilots, a number of POCs, whatever they want to do. Because arguably, from a customer perspective, if you fail fast enough and you're strict enough, you could do 100 and have the capacity for it if you were committed enough to that innovation. So I just wanted to get your take on it. Sorry, Paul.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Yeah.
So, with regards to doing 100, why do 10 POCs when you could do 100? Mm-hmm. Because it's a force of will. It's an exercise, right? It takes a lot of energy to do a pilot. Yeah. But if you look at it and frame it as in they're not failing fast enough with their pilots, they're not being strict enough to cut them off and put them to bed quick enough, they could be cycling through more pilots and testing value in more areas. How did that play into your thinking, or didn't it?
So what you're saying is that it makes more sense to do like a few pilots and fail fast so that you can move ahead to other pilots? Is that what you're...
Well, yeah. I mean, you could do 100 pilots in a year feasibly, or 18 months, if you were strict enough to cut off pilots that won't achieve it.
Yeah, that makes absolutely sense. I mean, I fully agree with you. That's even better if you can do it, if you do less pilots and you do it fast. Like the faster you fail, the faster you can start with new pilots, right? With others. But the thing, what I see is that, and of course there are exceptions. This doesn't apply to all IoT solution providers or all IoT system integrators out there. But there are lots of IoT solution providers and system integrators who have off-the-shelf solutions which do not need customization with a very with a very straightforward
use cases.
solution. Exactly. Like ready to use in the off-the-shelf platforms as well, right? There are many of those use cases, and I think these guys, they can definitely do more pilots. But I still see everyone, trying to pull rather than push, trying to apply the classical way of business development, sales hunting, trying to find 3 or 4 customers who might turn into like very, very large customers with large contracts, spending like 1 year just on these 4 or 5 or 6 pilots. And I think that's the wrong approach. It makes more sense what you just said, to fail faster and do more, but not only 4 or 5 in 1 year.
Yeah.
John, what's your thoughts on that?
So I had a quick Google just before starting on, and there are apparently 18 billion IoT devices at the end of 2024. So IoT is a big deal. I have lots of IoT devices in my house. There's my router, there's my smartwatch, got a home thermostat, and now I've got a new car, all serving compelling use cases. So gathering telemetry at the edge, making decisions at the edge, and activating actuators at the edge. One point that Afzal made in his book is that we should evangelize that it's an IoT solution. Whereas I think if it's just a compelling problem that we're solving, you don't need to talk about IoT. A smartwatch is an IoT device, but millions of people have them and don't care that it's an IoT device. It's solving a real need. A lot of the problems he talks about in his book about IoT projects failing are just startup problems, like solution in search of a problem. It's not a compelling enough problem, but they've got some cool tech that can solve it, but for not enough customers, or they never get product market fit. So there's some interest in it, but it's never quite compelling enough to get real sales.
Yeah. I think
behind that, Afzal, why should we evangelize about IoT as such, rather than just like this can solve real problems?
Because I don't know where to start. I wrote 130 pages about this. So look, of course, no one should care that the watch that they are using, that it's using the Internet of Things network, and no one should care about it when they drive their new BMW. Or no one should care about it when they manage or control their heating system by using their phone, right? That's basically how it should be. But we also shouldn't skip the step of creating urgency. And what I'm trying to say is that there is still a huge untapped potential when it comes to IoT. What I said a few minutes ago, there are still lots of hospitals let me put it differently. There are still lots of hospitals still throwing away medication for nothing, just because they didn't measure whether the door was open or closed, or the temperature. There are still railway management companies who send out people, like teams, to the railways to measure the temperature during the heat waves, because during heat waves it's very important to know the latest temperature of the railways, right? Otherwise trains will get in trouble. There are still railway companies, I think most of the railway companies, all of the rail, they're still doing it manually by sending out teams, delaying trains, while the solution for this was already introduced in 2016, and the pilots that were done in 2016 and 2017 were proven. We are talking about successful pilots, many successful pilots in the US, in Germany, in Austria, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in France, but still they're doing it manually. Why? Because they want to do things the old way. And that is something, by the way, that we are not going to change. If an organization is like, hey, we know that there is a solution for that, and we know it makes sense, we know it will save us a lot of money, we are not going to fix that. No one is going to fix that. If people are like that, they want to do things the old way just because it's the old way and they're afraid of change, then we are fucked. We are not going to do anything about that. So that's why the only way is to find all those railway management companies who are not aware of this solution. Now we are just betting on a few, but we haven't reached all of them yet. And that's why I think, and we are not going, by the way, we are not going to reach them by only talking about, did you know that you can save a lot of money by using this cool solution that will send you the latest temperature of your railways every 15 minutes on your app? That's not going to work. You need to create urgency. And what you see right now with AI, and let me emphasize that I'm not comparing AI and with IoT from a technology perspective. I'm only focusing on the marketing around it. If you look at AI right now, many CEOs have sent out letters or mailings like, "Hey guys, we are going to we should become an AI first company. Like we stop hiring people unless you can prove that it cannot be done with AI." That's what many CEOs are doing right now. Yeah, and a couple of years ago, we did the same, or some CEOs did the same with cloud. They said, "Hey, we should become cloud first, or we should become digital first." But I've never heard CEOs saying, "Hey, we should become IoT first."
Well, it did. To be fair, I've been working
Maybe
in
before I
IoT
was
since.
born, then.
Well, 2007 was my
Okay.
the grey's coming in, but my first IoT project, coming from its transformation from telemetry, and it was known as machine to machine as a badge thing, and then evolved to the terminology of IoT, was in 2007 in Australia, connecting remote sites to turn energy on and off for the Department of Defence. In 2000 and around that time, telecom operators started to build their machine-to-machine teams, building out the connectivity of it. And then by 2010, because machine-to-machine teams had not delivered their targets by a massive amount, they jumped onto the terminology of IoT. And that started to branch out and became the marketecture of the architecture, which is IoT. Because at the end of the day, inevitably, that's what IoT is. It's an architecture. It's a huge number of different parts, sensors, compute, gateways, cloud infrastructure, so on and so forth. It's an architectural design, bringing all of that together. And, a lot of businesses, to get their investment from shareholders and approvals with investments that they were going to make moving forward, was they were investing in IoT for operation efficiencies, for manufacturing 4.0, so on and so forth. So it has had that big push. It has had that moment in front of investors and shareholders, like AI is today. I think one of the things, like what really jumped out to me with what you were talking about, and there's so much I agree with you on your book. And I think it's so well written as well, very well articulated, and it's a fun read to have as well. And as I mentioned before the meeting, I found it really interesting on points that you were raising in the first half of the book, and then I was like, "Oh, but," and then 2 pages later you were answering that but. So it was almost like that preemption thing, which was fantastic. But then the sort of highlights of the to-do list in the back half is absolutely fantastic. There's one of the things that jumped out to me though is, and John and Evan have heard me talk about this before, as well as viewers of the show, is democratization. If you look at history, and I love the way that you revert to this, and you actually bring one of these scenarios up, is if you look at history with the PC as a starting point, the home PC took 10 years to boom, but it was democratized before that happened. When Windows basically replicated Mac, the operating system became a lot easier, that general public could actually turn on a computer and use it and install a game and so on and so forth, and it made it easier. With the smartphone, they didn't boom and adopt until Apple fixed that problem. Cloud really exploded the adoption of IoT. I remember in the late 90s, when I first started my career, so many businesses didn't even have email. Construction firms were some of the slowest. They didn't have it until 2003, 2004. But with the boom and drive for cloud, they enabled that. And that's when everybody started to get it. Apple democratized the smartphone. They created an ecosystem. You mentioned about applications in your book. And if you think about the boom on mobile devices, that was driven by Apple. They weren't the first, but what they did it the best. They showed how to do it the right way. You know, in the days of Windows Mobile, I think John and I have talked about this in the past. Evan and I have definitely drunkenly talked about this in the past. You had to go to a third-party website, buy a license key for the app, then go back to the App Store, download the app on your BlackBerry or your Windows mobile device or your Palm device, put the key in, and then get the app working. And the design and everything was all dysfunctional. It was a mess. It was horrible. Apple fixed that. You know, cloud did that for IoT. The problem that with IoT is the fact that nobody has democratized it. Nobody has made it simple, apart from consumer. If you look at the capabilities of Ring doorbells, so, you know, like talking about, actually, a lot of people are using things at home today. I think in my area in the UK, I'd probably say about 40% of houses have a Blink doorbell or a Ring doorbell. That's IoT.
Not for our benefit, Paul. Think about how they benefit from the data.
Yeah.
Can I just make another point? I mean, I think, Afzal, you talked about how we need to drive it into companies that are unaware and how people don't know these solutions exist on their doorstep and whatever else. And Paul talks about democratizing IoT. I think there's a couple of failings that were made as an industry, I think. Number one, I think a lot of the big vendors jumped too soon to create noise, not really having an appreciation for how long they'd have to sit with these, the POCs and the pilots, which in many cases wouldn't go anywhere, and maybe things should have matured in terms of their product stacks a bit more from a usability and plug and play perspective before they created that much noise. Because by the time customers were starting to realize that they could do things, I think a lot of vendors and solution providers were getting a bit long in the tooth and to sit with it. But also, I think when you look at how we approached trying to democratize IoT, is everyone went for the innovation budgets for the line of business owners predominantly. So you talked, Afzal, about the CIO not having an IoT first agenda. I think a lot of the time is because it was a shadow technology, like we had Shadow Cloud, and everyone was going around the CIO because they didn't want to be blocked by the CIO and IT for deploying this stuff. So you were talking to the line of business owners in marketing, logistics, supply chain, a lot of the non-carpeted spaces, as Cisco would call it. So the CIO didn't have it on his agenda a lot of the time because everyone's trying to work around him. So by the time innovation becomes part of the CIO's initiative a lot more robustly, which it definitely did with IoT, and I think with AI, it's almost too late. You know, AI is now here. IoT is definitely still there and still important, but there's some other noise which he's having to address. I think if we'd spent more time helping CIOs prioritize IoT in terms of the ROI, in terms of making sure the TCO made sense, then we would be courting line of business owners that had innovation budget and then a blindsided CIO that couldn't justify the cost of deploying it at scale because he wasn't involved from day zero. And I know that wasn't always the case, but in many cases that was definitely happening.
Because they were not involved in the early stages.
Exactly. So by that point, our 30 grand POC has been paid for by the head of marketing. Yeah. He has to go back to the business and say, okay, I want to roll this out across all stores. I need £500,000. And the CIO is going, for what?
Yeah. True. No, but I 100% agree with you. You're absolutely right. But this is again about like a situation where people are already like inside the company. Some people are already working about or with IoT, right? And the risk that something is going to fail, the risk that an IoT project is going to fail, it's super high. It's always with innovation. I also wrote this. Remember, like the guy who's cooking meals every day because he likes to cook, but he has leftovers every day. Yeah. So at one at one point of time, he's like, "Hey, it would be very useful if I can, let my neighbors know that they can buy this leftover from me for a very cheap price." But he's not a tech savvy person, so he's not going to do something with it, right? But if 100 guys are cooking their meals every day and having leftovers and thinking like this, then there is a big chance that 10 of those guys are tech savvy persons, and 5 of those guys are persons who are people who are really going to do something with it. But probably only one is going to succeed with the project. The other ones are going to fail. That's unfortunately how life works and how business works. And the same applies to IoT projects. Even when the value is clear, even then we only have very little influence on whether it's going to succeed or fail. Because to be honest, logic never wins from company cultures.
Yeah.
Never. And so the only thing that we can influence is that we find those companies who are not thinking about IoT yet, which are a lot.
I think it's also
where I'm heading to.
I was just saying, I think it's also about making sure that those that do know about it within those companies or are tech savvy are, if not influential over budgets, they're at least trusted advisors or in that space of the company, because otherwise you can spend a lot of time using up the budgets of those individuals, and then when it's then to find out that actually they have very little influence in the rest of the business. Okay.
I think it leads on to a great point that you make in the book, in regards to culture, and this is something I'm like passionately in support of your positioning here, and it's something that I've seen so many times. Great examples in manufacturing and in fact there was a one in logistics where a project of a company that I worked for in the past was deploying a computer vision solution, monitoring and making sure that making palletization smart. And one of the guys actually went, you're not solving the problem. And the problem was there was $100,000 worth of boxes disappearing. And the boxes were disappearing once they were getting on the van. If they were on the wrong van, whatever was left was going into the ether, should we say. And there was huge pushback and huge challenges put in place. Cameras start to get moved out of space and stuff like that. But it was actually one guy that became an advocate who actually demonstrated how beneficial it was for the job and how it could actually make them do the job quicker, that they could get an hour off their shift and reduce the time that they were working and get paid the same because they were paid for a shift. And as long as those boxes were done, they were done. And, if it hadn't been for that culture shift of a guy actually going, oh, hold on, my KPIs are get all these boxes on perfectly right, get it done. And for me, instead of having me to scan a box, work out which pallet was on, put it on that pallet, all I've got to do is hold it under one of the cameras. The green light will flash. I put it on, done. It was a much smoother, faster process that they managed to reduce the time and stuff. That had helped change the mentality and culture for that adoption. It was the same with production line one that we did, and we had cameras making sure that products were being made and coming down the production line in the right way and of the right quality and stuff. And again, there was friction points there. But when we gave them the tools to train the models and sort of explain to them what the camera could see and couldn't see, they got really interested in it and they started to highlight it. And it's about bringing that culture in with education to get them motivated to see that it's not all about removing humans. It's about keeping that human in the loop and optimizing the human. Now, that said, there are an awful lot of use cases where it is the key driver is sadly about reducing human collateral to maximize profits, because that's the corporate world with the capitalist world that we're living in, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's only the corporate world, but I think it's like natural behavior, right, of human beings, that we just want to keep the status quo. It's not in our nature to do things and make ourselves obsolete. We're trying to stay relevant, and people, I think in general, do not realize that a way to stay relevant is constantly try out and learn and do new things.
Yeah. I think there has been a big shift in the culture since coming out of COVID, especially, that innovation funds are getting less and less and less. And sometimes that's when real innovation and creativity come in, because you've got those restrictions. You know, there was a period around the 2014 to 16 mark. Like, I was given on projects I worked on insane budgets to run IoT projects and validate and test things. And today, if I could get 10% of that, of some of the things that I want to do or would love to do, I'd be a happy man. But it's even hard to get that type of investment and money.
It was very visible. I mean, from a distributor perspective, we obviously saw we'd made some big bets, and we're still very much invested in having IoT in the portfolio. But yeah, I would say from an enterprise channel perspective, it came a little later, maybe 2018. And it was like a free-for-all playground. All these companies said, yeah, we want to try people counting. We want to run a pilot to track a fleet of our vans from a route optimization perspective, or from a fleet predictive maintenance perspective, whatever it was. And there were teams in place within vendors, within solution providers, within solution enablers, to go on that journey with them. And it does feel like once COVID hit, we're allowed to say the word COVID now, which is nice. Everything became so laser focused around tangible, quick returns that those teams were either disbanded or moved elsewhere in the business, and budgets all became about, okay, is it going to address a cliff edge problem? Is it going to address an immediate compliance issue? Is it going to address an immediate, monetary sinkhole, which everyone's staring at from our board, And if it didn't fit that criteria, yeah, I remember it being very difficult. I mean, I'm curious, Afzal, what do you see? Whose job is it to change that culture? Is it the CEO's job? Is it the CIO's job? Is it the technology vendors?
Yeah. So, I work at Deutsche Telekom, large German ex-government organization, right? So I do have an opinion about this. And when I joined Deutsche Telekom, that was in 2019. Before 2019, I was working at T-Mobile Netherlands, so their daughter company in the Netherlands. And then I moved to Deutsche Telekom in Germany. And when I started, they were also doing a campaign, like the group CEO and the CEO of Deutsche Telekom Germany. And the campaign, the headline of the campaign was, "We are not going to change the company culture for you. You need to do it yourself."
Okay.
And I gave them the benefit of the doubt. But after 6 years, I really believe that it should come. That is something like the only thing that should come from top down. That's the cultural change. Otherwise, it's not going to work. People are too afraid to change things. That's my experience. And to be honest, not only in Germany, I also see it at large companies in the Netherlands, and I assume in the UK it's the same. It only changes when the CEO gives people. If the CEO gives people the feeling that, hey, it's allowed to do things differently. Actually, I encourage it, and go and make some mistakes. But if that doesn't come from the CEO, it's not going to happen.
I think I'd agree with you, and I think it's a thing of not just saying it, but leading by example.
Yeah, exactly.
And making it very visible that you are doing that, and that you want the rest of the business to do that.
Yeah.
And really, I think that's the only way to truly, especially at pace, change the culture. Otherwise, I mean, some companies, when they emerge and stuff, like when I was at EE, which originally I was at Orange, and it did the joint venture with T-Mobile and became EE, and then got acquired by BT. That was a really interesting experience, because there was just so much, there was two cultures, then all of a sudden there was three cultures, and the two original cultures were still trying to navigate their way around of working together. And then this third culture came in, which had bought the other two and trying to embed that and bring it into as well. It was a really interesting experience and it's been an interesting thing to watch from afar as well.
And that's also I wrote another chapter in the book, and maybe you haven't seen it yet, Evan. It's called like the hyper efficiency culture.
I did see that.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that should be part of that cultural change. The eagerness, to question everything every time. Like, hey, I'm doing this like this right now, but is there a better way? Is there a more efficient way? Maybe not every day, but at least every month.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's, I think a lot of companies pride themselves on efficiently following a broken process.
Yeah.
Right.
Or using efficiency when it suits them, and when it doesn't suit them, that's how it is right now.
I mean, you need a company that's committed to a continuous improvement model in all the right areas ultimately. But it's, and I do think that I mean, I'm certainly starting to see some of that culture resurface. I think a lot of the handcuffs that organizations had on through being in survival mode, post COVID, and then the supply chain challenges in the silicon space and everything else, they seem to be loosening up, and we're seeing companies starting to re-explore, that innovation around efficiency piece. And that's partly because the cost of not being efficient is so visible now. But yeah, no, I think that's certainly squarely within the profile of what a good customer should look like. If you're trying to sell IoT, are they committed to continuous improvement? If not, come back in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Evan, that brings a question back to the forefront of my mind when I was reading the book. I was trying to define who the customer was and who needs to be educated. Is it the end customer? So if you think about the ecosystem, I created an image for this, and that's on my other brand machine, not the one that I work for, being Lenovo. And if you think about the different layers, you've got your silicon layer, and Intel and others talk about customers being their customers. But really, they don't actually have any physical touch with those. They may go meet with them, talk about the future, promote some things that they're looking to bring, so on and so forth. But as in money to from one business to another, that filters down. So you've got your silicon layer, you've then got your OEM layer, you've then got the software layer, you've then got your distribution layer, you've then got your integrator layer, and large enterprise. And this is the definition of different customers. You've then got your system integrator layer. You've got some ISVs working directly with customers. On the consumer side, you then have your direct consumer brand that's taken all those bits to then offer their service solution to consumer customers that way as well. And so I was trying to sort of define within the book of when the mention of customers, who the customer was it an end customer, or was it an OEM selling to a partner that's taken their pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to build out what is architecture of IoT? Is that to Afzal? I think it's open to everybody, anybody.
I mean, it's a funny one, right? Because I think depending on where you are in the supply chain, in that value chain, and I think this is where that convergence hasn't happened. I presented at the what's it called? Oh, it was another group, like think tank group, about the channel multiverse. Because you've got the silicon and module routes to market and channels, and the telco and the OEMs. They're all entirely different universes, and they kind of touch in different places. But what they really want is the people downstream to at least be committed to something, right? But yeah, I mean, Afzal, what's your view on the customer here? Because I guess from a telco viewpoint, you want your connectivity in things that people are selling, but also I know the telcos are all looking to become techcos selling things.
Yeah. So let's take it step by step. Yeah. What I want, or what we want, is that more companies, more entrepreneurs, that they will feel the urgency, feel the need for connecting their business to save costs, to do things more efficiently, right? That's what we want. And what we need for that is we need to create awareness. And I want to give you an example that I came across it on LinkedIn a few days ago, and I'm going to read what he wrote. He wrote, "I'm an entrepreneur in hospitality in The Hague. We run several restaurants and beach clubs with a lot of love and passion. So this is not a CIO, this is not a developer, not an engineer, it's an entrepreneur in hospitality and beach clubs. So we run several restaurants and beach clubs with a lot of love and passion. There's creativity, hospitality, and craftsmanship in it. But I also see what's coming, AI. And I don't want to lag behind. I want to lead. I want to change my menus without a graphic design agency. I want to run online ads without a marketing department. I want to make cost calculations, scheduling support, purchasing advice with AI. I want to understand what AI can already do for me today. And I also want to understand what it can do for me in the future. I want to think about more use cases because I'm 100% sure I can leverage AI for many more things than I just mentioned. Now, this is an entrepreneur who's suffering from FOMO right now, fear of missing out. He feels the urgency to do something with AI and to figure out what else is possible with it. Now, this is what we want. So now the question is, who is going to educate the customers to create this FOMO effect, to create the urgency effect? And I think everyone has a responsibility in this. No matter where you are sitting in the value chain, everyone has a responsibility in creating this like FOMO or urgency effect. But I understand that like a startup, especially a hardware startup that is just starting, they don't have the means to do that, to fully focus on that, right? So I do think that companies like AWS, Azure, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, Verizon, IBM, Microsoft, Lenovo, like these large companies, they have healthy revenue streams apart from IoT. I think they have the biggest responsibility if they want to do something in and with IoT. That they have the biggest responsibility to educate the market about IoT and the possibilities and the cultural things that it requires. Because they have the biggest pockets.
Is there an opportunity here that actually with that use case there that you were talking about with this entrepreneur? I mean, the reality is what they're highlighting is that they're seeing that they can no longer require a person to do their marketing, their collateral. They can, learn how to do the right prompts using the right AI to at much lower cost or free, do all that for them. So it's self-gain for them, but putting other people out of roles for getting their piece of the market.
Yeah.
But there are opportunities there where people are actually working with and using AI to understand how a concept of theirs would work and what they would need technically, that what would be then constructed from the AI is like, so for example, an Uber-like solution. That's going to be an IoT architecture. Now it's not going to describe it as an IoT architecture, but it's going to design them an architecture that inevitably is IoT, and therefore they will understand the different moving parts that they would require for that solution. So that maybe the terminology IoT may well change. Maybe the terminology starts to be jumped onto of using smart rather than IoT because you're turning things smart.
True. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I reached him and I told him about all the IoT use cases for restaurants and hotels and beach clubs, and he never heard about it. And of course, we could piggyback on the AI hype, but to be honest, most of the people, most of the AI consultants of today, they don't even know about IoT. So it's dangerous to wait for piggybacking.
I mean, so I think, I mean, for me personally, that offering for a restaurant, and actually I've talked to a friend of mine who's a GM for a hotel about managing occupancy in his bar and restaurant, that leveraging his existing CCTV camera infrastructure and putting an artificial intelligence gateway there would it actually AI empowers and enables IoT beyond collecting the data and sensors. It starts to push the autonomy of it.
Yeah, that's right. But sorry, I'm still thinking about because it was an interesting question. Like, who should educate the customers? And I still think that, look, like the four of us, we've been talking about AI already 10 years ago, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm even talking about it when I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger as a 5-year-old kid chasing robots, right? But when did this urgency and FOMO about AI started exactly? It was after the launch of ChatGPT.
Yeah,
And
October
then lots of
2021.
other Gen AI tools. Yeah. So ChatGPT, so the killer use case, right? And I just wanted to make it more clear what I mean when I say that those guys with the biggest pockets. I don't think that it was Azure's or Amazon's job to create IoT dashboards. I don't think it was Deutsche Telekom's or Telefonica's job to create IoT platforms. I don't think it was their job to create their own IoT devices. I think it was their job to work together on such killer use cases, just to start the hype, just to start to educate the market and make people and especially entrepreneurs aware of all the possibilities with IoT.
See, I would disagree a little bit there because I think that there was a lot of noise, but the failure was in the execution a lot of the time because it was such a fragmented ecosystem, especially if you were dealing with large metro spaces. It was only when IoT was quite late into its development as a technology as IoT, not M2M, that we started to see solution providers take ownership of packaging the sensor and the gateway and the platform into more of an off-the-shelf type solution. But up until that point, there had been years of creating noise around use cases, to your earlier point, as you mentioned in the book, with their single pilot that turned into something more, and a trail of pilots that didn't go anywhere. And I think a lot of that was because there wasn't enough ownership maybe from a lot of the big companies to offer the monolithic stack of sensor gateway cloud or whatever it was going to be. It was the small companies that were doing it, and they didn't have the scale and the reach. So slightly different view there. I mean, I think you framed it it seems like you framed a lot of it as a marketing problem as to why IoT hadn't been as widely adopted as we'd all anticipated, and not a technology problem. I think it was also a bit of a technology problem in there weren't a great deal of large companies owning enough of the stack, so they were leaving it in the hands of companies that were just still learning about this stuff to piece together all the pieces, and in many cases the customers. We saw Bill here's made a comment, getting that IoT advice from consultants and whatever else would be so much easier if some of the big players took more ownership of more of the stack. I don't think that happened enough.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this is a really interesting statement, and hopefully I have put a question there to Bill on YouTube in regards to, did he have a problem statement for the solution, or did he need to understand? Oh, here we go. He's responded. Yes, and hold on. Yeah, so we've managed to cobble it together, but perhaps taken a lot more time as navigating from vendor to vendor, trying to ascertain their respective roles. And I think this goes back to my statement about democratization, that if there are 90% of a solution that somebody like Bill can then search for and know where to search for, then and then the offering of services to help, you know, integrate and add that 10%. Maybe that's what will deliver the acceleration of it. I think, you know, from his original statement question there, in regards to, you know, he found it really difficult to find IoT advice or consultants that can help with building the architecture that isn't tied to a data offering or a particular sensor brand or a particular connectivity and so on and so forth. And I think it's one of those things that I find confusing on LinkedIn when I see so many IoT specialists and such like, but they're actually focused on selling SIM cards. I get lots of those because I used to be in the telecom industry, right? But then you've got specific people who are talking about IoT and specifically a gateway. And then you do have some further up the stack solution, but the solution is the software. They don't make any recommendations on hardware. So you've got to go figure that. You need an architect for that. That it is almost like, it's just a load of tools thrown in front of you. It's like a Meccano set or a Lego set with no instructions. And maybe that's what, as an industry, we need to get better at, is helping them pull this together without any of those ties in regards to it's just about me, it's just about us. It's one of those things that I have been thinking about setting up a business and finding integrators, because getting beyond POC, my problem has always been find the human resources to go into a factory or go up a lamppost and install a camera or install a gateway in a factory. And there are hopes and beliefs that global system integrators can do that. But you know, from experience, their heritage is predominantly around IT and being cloud management, which is generally done in places like China and India. And that's why cloud scaled and grew, because it was all done remotely. It was IT infrastructure remotely. When it comes down to IoT, this is physical assets that need to be placed in places.
Do you not think
this is
that
again
maybe
an
we
awareness?
Sorry, no, carry on.
This is again an awareness problem, right? It's again the IoT awareness problem, and I'm going to tell you why. Simply because it's like fragmentation or having too many vendors. That's not a bad thing, yeah. Because when you build technology, and especially when you build hardware, you always want to like use the best components and the best technology stack parts for your solution, because it needs to be reliable, right? The problem here is that when you go to Reddit and you ask, hey, I'm working on this LLM solution, and I'm not sure if I need to use LangChain or Llama Index for my LLM framework, you will get thousands of comments from people who have experience with these technology frameworks, right? But ask the same question. Hey, I'm going to build this solution. It's a parking sensor, and it needs to run on a battery for 10 years. Do I need to use LoRaWAN or Narrowband IT? You will not get more than 5 reactions, because even within the developer ecosystem, IoT is not a known concept. And because you can never rely on what's written on the websites and in the white papers when you build something. You only can rely on people with experience, and we don't have people with experience in IoT. Not enough.
We've just got some. Thanks for that, Afzal. I think we've just got another statement here. I guess there's still room to create awareness and foster IoT projects from an open source community approach, where different companies, their specialists, and more communities work together to achieve common goals, challenging goals. What are your thoughts on that? I'm a huge advocate personally of open source. You know, one of Afzal and my common friends is Mark Paus at Bellina, as an example, with their open source. I was on a call with SUSE today. You know, Intel have now made their Edge IoT platform open source, along with Intel Getty, would you believe? So once upon a time, I was trying to sell that, Evan, and now it's free. And it's a phenomenal platform. And the thing is, though, it was a module that can deliver such big things as part of something else. That I think if you split the two things, if the technology landscape and the communities and open source being able to take it, build stuff, wrap around a service around it, like the likes of IoTech do, That's great. The next stage is, how does that get put in front of a customer? I don't know if you heard that, because I noticed my screen went blank. But how you take those solutions built with Livestream to being in front of a customer, do a POC, but also having a plan on scale. How does it scale and get installed and integrated?
I'll tell you who's fantastic. Sorry, speak over.
No, I was going to say we've got about 1 minute left of the show, and we're going to need to wrap up. But over to you, Evan.
No, I was just going to say, I think one group of companies that's done a fantastic job at driving some of that awareness and collaborative spirit is when you look at some of the connectivity middleware guys, I guess predominantly in the LoRa space. Apologies.
Yeah.
But
true.
You look at the Things Network, you look at companies like Akenza, you look at ThingSpeak and all these guys. They went out to the ecosystem and got them to certify their sensors on the platform for rapid deployment. So you could truck roll these things out with guys that are used to just installing printers and CCTV cameras and Wi-Fi access points. But for whatever reason, I think they got involved in a lot of smart city projects, those guys. And there's always going to be the questions around LoRa versus NB-IoT or LTE-M or whatever else. But I think they probably did the best job for me in lighting up the imagination of local authorities, of schools, of whoever, in being playful with innovation. So that seems to have died down a little bit recently.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Afzal?
Yeah, I really liked what Evan just said. I just wanted to second that, like the things industries. So people can disagree with stuff that I wrote in my book, but basically, you saw who wrote the first page, right? Everything that I wrote there is the concept of the things industries. That's how they did it. And they are reaping the rewards from what they've done. I think they're the only one who worked on awareness and market development. And if they would also do SIM cards, things would look very differently right now for the cellular IoT industry.
John, any final words for you? Thanks, Afzal.
Yeah, I agree with Afzal's point completely about it being difficult to do the IoT. I got sent a demo board from, let's say, a Nordic provider, and beautiful piece of hardware, great capability, miniaturized. They've clearly put a lot of work into it. Really, really, really hard to develop for. Poor code examples, poor documentation, no training courses when they started out. It was like dragging a paddle through treacle. So we could do a lot better on that. Final thought is we have Jennifer Williams next month on 1st of July talking to us about speech at the edge.
We do indeed, and thanks for getting that organised, John, as always. Afzal, absolute pleasure having you on the show. Really would love to have you along again. Evan, great to see you and have you again. And we'll be definitely having you again. I might even get you to take over and present moving forward, but especially with that background. But thanks for everybody for joining us tonight. And it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up. Really looking forward to the talk next month. And please do order Afzal's book. It's a fantastic short read. It's 130 pages. I managed to read it from Newcastle to London on the train. So not bad going for me, being dyslexic. And on that, I will say thank you and good night.
Bye.
Oh, goodness. It's the video.